Option.
Would you like to pray over it, or do you want me to?
What's that?
Would you like to pray over it, or would you like me to?
Yep, just give me 2 seconds. Yo, Malachi. Just about to start the conversations. Yeah. Okay. Cool. See you in the. Yep, no problem. All right. Speak soon. Okay. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, may you guide our words, our spirit to enlighten the path, enlighten the topic that we talk about. May it bring light to just even one person. May it illuminate a topic that we all know about, that at some point we've all been through. And share your word, your glory, and know that through you we have connection, we have communion, we have community, we have love. And may we continue to strive for your ideals, to do your will, and extend that love to whoever we meet, and break that cycle of loneliness that people feel in today's world as we have drifted further and further from your word. Lord, we ask through the Holy Spirit for you to guide our speech, our words, our action, our thoughts in all that we do. May you bless everyone on this call moving forward. May we cling to you, your word, and put your words into action day after day. In the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen.
So, my friend, completely over to you. Point and shoot. All I need to do is just press live. When you want to go live, let's go live. It doesn't need to be punctual. You can go a few more to jump in.
Julio.
Just, as Aaliyah quite rightly said.
That's exactly how she put it. Tone and everything. Let me think. Just need to quickly shoot this link over to Malachi. Oh man.
Disabled the waiting room.
Okay, great. Crying out loud. Got a Leah in the head now, huh?
You know what? If singing that song, I always know that I'm gonna end up singing more.
Yeah. There's never a time for us to not sing a Leah, to be fair.
Plan F. If it's just us two, how do we want to rock it?
So we could probably end up having a somewhat more focused and slightly more in deep discussion, but probably just for not as long.
Sure.
Well, Malachi, I think he's on his way either to or from work. I can't remember what he said. So he said he'd try and join.
Somebody will be on the way.
Coolio.
Somebody will be on the way, and hopefully we can get Troy. Oh, the session's like that, huh? We can get Troy on, and then go live again. Banana and a peppermint tea. I've not tried this combination before.
Didn't hear that. Your sound seems to be coming. Could be my thing, to be fair.
No, you're not the first person to say this. Is that any better?
Yup.
Good. Oh, it works. It's better.
Seems to be.
Good. The old classic blowing.
Hasn't failed since the 90s.
Mm-hmm. What I was saying, banana and a peppermint tea. I've not had this combination before.
Banana and a peppermint. I think that could work. Peppermint's got I need something kind of dull to go with banana, so it always has to be almonds or cashews or.
I see, that's a good cashews and banana. That's a dangerous one.
That's always, especially if it's got to that point. Like, I don't know about you, but bananas for me. Hence the reason I buy a bunch that are normally nowhere, well, not necessarily nowhere close to ripe. If I buy a few in a bunch, then it's going to be in that cusp of still more green, but starting to ripen. But I'll never buy fully ripe bananas because you leave that for an hour, come back, and that thing is gone.
Black bananas looking at you like, what do you expect?
It's like, man, from the walk from here, from Lidl, nah. Yeah, I might start leaving one or two to turn and decide to see if I can make a banana loaf or something. Oh, man. Yeah. Some good words from Damon. It was like, be open about loneliness, even in relationships.
Save it. It sounds strong. It sounds strong already. It sounds strong. Save it.
Yeah.
It sounds strong. 5 minutes past.
How long should we give it?
I don't know. The only reason why I say that is because we may, capital A, have an audience outside of.
That's very true. Very true.
Let's just keep it between us and go initiate Plan F.
Plan F it is. We call this Casual August. So every August we have a casual one that has 2 or maybe 3. So on schedule.
Say something.
What's that?
Wants me to type something first.
Okay.
Get a title. No, just conversation about loneliness, yeah?
Loneliness in all its forms.
Where's the line going right now? Where's the phone? Check that your stream is connected and require all in. Okay.
We're good?
1 minute, 1 minute.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Second Tuesday of August, and we are back again for our third conversation. Today's topic is loneliness, thinking about what causes it. Has it been increased over this period of time? What has potentially increased it? How can we combat it as individuals, as a community, all of these types of things. So let us see where the conversation goes. So I had a few talking points to touch upon, if that's cool. So my first one to kind of start is simply, when somebody says the word loneliness to you, what do you kind of define as loneliness?
I think loneliness is a situation where some person can be forced into being by themselves. So I think there's always a difference between being alone and then being lonely. So obviously people like being alone all the time during the day. Some people like being alone during the night. But loneliness may be a long-term thing to which people suffer from due to a whole host of reasons. They may be able to be lonely because they're not confident or emotional stresses. So being alone is thrust upon somebody. And I think that is where one person can come.
Sonia.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I had unexpected bad traffic.
No
Hello.
problemo. My question I posed to all of us is, when somebody says the word loneliness to you, what do you define as loneliness?
Good question. I think loneliness is a state of a person doesn't have others that they can feel safe with. And therefore, they may not go to anyone. Even so, why am I saying this? Some people may be lonely even with people around them because they don't feel safe with people. So they can still feel lonely in that sense. So in the same way that someone who has no one around them may actually not feel lonely because they may not feel the need to have someone to go to or whatever.
True, yeah. I think there's a lot to kind of take from both of your definitions. I mean, there is that sense of that being thrust upon someone. So as you said, being on your own doesn't necessarily mean that that person is lonely or has feelings of loneliness, because that could be an active decision. And as you said, Sonia, people can then also be in amongst lots of people and actually feel lonely. So there's more to it than just being in amongst people or being surrounded with people. And I guess from my end, I'd probably think that I'd be surprised to find one person on this earth that has never felt loneliness, no matter how short-lived it is. But I do feel I know in fact there's chronic loneliness, which doesn't necessarily fit to a lot of people's feelings of loneliness, in that sense of it being a lot more long-term. So there is those types of feelings that can arise from what have you, and that may have more connotations to mental health links, you know. But yeah, I think in terms of the definition, I think we've generally got that similar type of sound understanding of what, when somebody mentions it or feeling, or you see it or you read it or what have you, you get that feeling of actually, yeah, I understand what it is when you are talking to me about loneliness in that sense. I guess, well, in this very strange and unusual time that we've lived through, it's only right and likely that feelings of loneliness have increased throughout this period, just because of the fact of that breaking of connection, social connection, isolation, people having to isolate for lots of different reasons. But it'd be good to get your thoughts on, in general, what do you feel are some of the main causes of loneliness with people?
I have to go first. So one of the main causes of loneliness, wow. Well, us primarily working with those that are vulnerable, primarily those that are on the homeless and those that are without home. I have come into touch, as all two of us have, all three of us have, and with a lot of people that are lonely due to social isolation, which so far reaches out to financial. The causes of that are crazy. I've always said that the majority of people that I have met personally, and I'm sure the statistics kind of marry up, and the large majority of people at homeless are men. And after having conversations, a large majority of their reasons for being homeless is for a relationship breakdown. So I say that to emphasize that it can be relationships that actually make someone homeless, which is kind of a weird kind of combination that some of your close ones can make you feel very isolated and you want to detach yourself. So I would say, especially with the emphasis on homelessness, I think that would be one of the main reasons why people suffer from loneliness, a breakdown of relationships, and another word which I would chuck into the mix is community. Not many people are able to find deep connections in the communities in which they sit within. Hence why birds of forever flock together, and that's an attempt to form your own community. So yeah, that's a little bit about it.
Cool, I like that. Sonia, any thoughts?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, that's a really good insight, Jerome. Like I said before, I feel, like I said before, I think people, when they don't feel safe to go to people for whatever reasons, can make them feel like they're lonely. Now, reasons why that may happen, could be anything from like a breakdown in a relationship with someone you thought you could trust. Maybe could be, because you mentioned on financial isolation. I believe that maybe if people have guilt over their financial situation and don't want to be a burden onto other people, that could also place them in a position where they find it difficult to interact with people, even if they love like someone that they love dearly, or vice versa. And I can't remember what I said the first one. I'm
Is it
sorry.
fear? Was it mentioned?
Fear. Yeah. I suppose if you've lived through certain types of trauma, you could have fear from previous experiences, and therefore, especially if you have additional mental health needs, it can put you in a position where you don't know how to be vulnerable with people, or you're fearful of being vulnerable with people, and therefore you'll isolate yourself a little bit, and people continue to allow you to be isolated, and that leads to being very lonely.
Sure. I think you guys have actually touched on two key points that I want to kind of expand upon a bit. So the first one, I think let's go with that kind of fear, and the lack of ability to kind of be vulnerable around others and with others, which I think is probably understated a bit. So it's like, for example, I guess imagine that person that everybody knows who goes around as like the life of the party everywhere, but that person you then later then go on to find out it happens to be, it has been incredibly lonely for some time, and because loneliness is not necessarily one of those things that's always easy to spot, it can easily go under the radar for people, because in the society people can put up so many barriers for allowing, like, for somebody to have to get through to find out about themselves, and that's obviously down to that person being willing to open up to others. So that, I think, can be a massive cause and lead to loneliness. And obviously, Sonia, you touched on like trust and that fear that people have of being able to open up, and lack of trust, I guess, which also then can also link to drawing your point about relationship breakdown. So I think on those points, in terms of trust, do you feel that that is probably one of the, or possibly one of the biggest key markers for people being lonely in of themselves, being able to trust others?
I actually think it could well be. I'm trying to remember. I know someone who once did sort of a mental health questionnaire due to perhaps mental health problems. And I'm trying to think of some of the questions that would be on there, sort of where they've got to say, I could imagine, I think one of the questions would be, do you trust others easily? And that comes like on a scale of 1 to 10. And, if someone is going to say, no, I do not trust people easily, that can place them in a vulnerable position where they're not able to communicate to others how they feel, and I think in those kind of questionnaires, the bottom of the line, I think, is trying to see how likely is the person sort of to, it's a slightly different topic, but like, to harm themselves. So if someone is not able to discuss with people certain things because they don't trust people, then that could lead them to not able to relate to the next person, not have someone that they can confide in, and then yeah. So
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that's that's a major thing, trust. Broken trust. I think there's two things of which instantly come into thoughts of which can come into play. So when trust is displayed, and there's a lack of mistrust or overtrust, and then it can go either way. So if you display trust and you're mistrusting, and somebody's hurt your trust, then there's a cause of saying, I'm not going to display that trust again. And if you're over trusting, this is kind of, I guess, where it comes into having this relationship. You can you can not necessarily form a true connection.
Mm.
So yes, trust is a major component, of which is very difficult because we live in a situation that not many people are willing to trust and to show trust, because I don't think, because it's heavily connected to vulnerability. So if I'm going to share a part of me, and trust you with my vulnerability, and allow that relationship to grow, then that's going to be, I guess, how you can form connections. Yes.
So I guess what we've kind of learned at this point is that connection is quite a minefield in the way that I guess we as humans have to experience it and build that level, those levels. It's like we can all agree that trust is a necessity for being able to form deep, close connections with other people and friendships. But at the same time, it leaves you in an incredibly vulnerable space when you do. So is there something to be said about how we form relationships as people? So not just friendship relationships, it could be romantic relationships as well. It could be a whole host of things. Hi, Tony. Thanks for joining. So we've just been talking about on the topic of loneliness. So talked a bit about definitions of loneliness and kind of moved on to thinking about what some of the main causes of loneliness have been or are. And some of the things that have come up are things like people having that fear of trusting others to be vulnerable around them. Also relationship breakdown, and just not being able to form those proper connections with others in a deep type of way. Yeah, feel free to chime in with any thoughts that you've got.
Right. I'll try and gather my thoughts. I'm suffering a bit from heat exhaustion, actually.
It's been hot.
It is, well, I think, yeah. Did it break 30 degrees today?
Yeah. So if I talk gibberish, then you'll know. Yeah, I found there's all kinds of different loneliness things, isn't there? And looking for strategies to overcome that feeling as well. But there's loads of different factors involved, isn't there, as well? Particularly, for example, there might be a lot of things going on in the daytime for people to do, but in the evening time, that can be quite a very difficult time for people, particularly during this COVID thing, because I find actually Zoom meetings quite isolating, you know, in a way, even though you're talking to people. It's not quite the same interaction as meeting people. And I know that we were talking with the Arts and Health Conference yesterday that they're going to try and do hybrid things so that you have small meetings, maybe outside, and then do some online things as well. So it can bring people together more, but by doing a mixture of online things and real things.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think when it comes to, for example, Zoom meetings, because I've noticed that a lot. So, for example, with church, we have Zoom meetings in our home groups. But, you know, if we met as a group of people, we would then sort of kind of navigate towards each other and have conversations. Whereas in an online setting, it's very difficult to have more than one conversation going at any time. So there's usually one person speaking, other people are listening. And trying to then sort of, you know, take off your mute and then trying to speak up and not have that awkward part where people try to say things at the same time. That can be also difficult to navigate. And then even if you go on to sort of mini breakout groups, that's still difficult because you're going to be put in a group where you don't actually know who you're going to speak to, and you don't know what the dynamic of the group is. So it's really difficult to find that level of, I guess, level of trust in that conversation. It's a very small sort of fear of, for some people, that maybe of, oh, who am I going to speak to? I don't really know. I don't really want to talk about my problems to lots of people.
Sure.
And yeah, it is difficult to engage online. You're right.
Absolutely, yeah. There's quite a bit of adaptability we have to show from moving from a physical space to a online space, in terms of, as you mentioned, like, it's often, you won't get obviously people jumping in at different points. There's very much a social norm that people have to stick to ensure that everybody's heard. And I'm sure nobody could really say that they're used to seeing themselves talking during a conversation, which, who knows, could add additional pressure to the person that's talking as well. I know I don't like seeing myself talking. I don't know about anybody else, but there are those additional points. And I think even during work, colleagues have mentioned that obviously, whilst this has become the new normal, it can never really replace the face-to-face feel of conversations and talking, just because, as you've mentioned, there's things that you will do in that physical space that you just can't do in a Zoom call, and things that we wouldn't even necessarily think that we do in a talking face-to-face, that we then realize we've lost once we take it into an online space. So that is fully agreed. Tony, did you mention that you've done some work on loneliness?
Yeah, I don't know if people know what I'm doing. I'm doing, well, I'm a photographer and a writer mainly, and I started doing the project for the Arts Council last year, and it was supposed to finish in April next year, but it's extended now to April the following year, because I started before COVID came in, and I got lots of things planned to do in March, April, to meet people. It wasn't just locally, it was like in Norfolk, in Wakefield particularly. I was going to go all over, and I've had to put it all on hold because you can't do it, you know. A lot of it's local, but not all of it's local, but I can't do a lot of that to change things, because I'm recording people's on tape, well, digital tape, but not long-winded things, you know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes talking about what loneliness means to them and what kind of things they do to make it feel better, and then trying to look for something positive. And I've been doing portraits, lockdown portraits, with people standing at a window but holding an object or doing an activity that gives them some pleasure or some hope for the future. So it's not all about negativity. It's trying to, you know, lift up things. And personally, I've had to do personal stuff as well. I mean, I've just, I wrote quite a few poems to do with what's going on, and they're coming out in an anthology. And Benjamin Zafanai's in it. There's only 2 different people in this book that's coming out. So it's, a lot of it is personal, but then I don't project my personal things onto other people, you know. I mean, they're all different viewpoints, but it's quite, I've probably been busier doing lockdown than I was before, but in a different way from what I did before. But I really want to work with people. I like to work with groups in Nottingham, you know, with you, but it can be on a one-to-one basis. It's not necessarily in a group, you know. But I'm doing portraits still, but I'll have to do them at a distance, you know. I can't go like 2 inches away from somebody and then get them to say a few things, or write something down, or maybe do some activity. And then they're going in exhibitions, and it's not just exhibitions and galleries. I want them to be in public spaces as well. So people have to sign a form, you know, agreeing to it. But I'm not a pushy person. I work with people rather than against them, you know. But I'm coming from a background, you see, of that 20 odd years ago. I lost my wife and my mum and dad all at the same time, and my son's been missing 10 years. So there's lots of factors that have affected me. But it's not going to be a miserable thing that's going to be totally down, you know. People are going to feel really down, you know. I mean, what I've been doing a lot of, I'm a bit disabled, but still I get out in the fresh air. I've been doing lots of little walks in woods and local things, and because I live in a village, and the hospitals in Derby have commissioned me to do an exhibition in October, a physical one in the hospital, of all kind of like things that are positive, called Illuminate, which is all about the glory of sunshine and on trees and leaves and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's not just about, but I like to try and bring art things out with people, you know, who've never done anything before, and write a poem or take a photograph, do a sketch or do something positive. So it's not just about documentary, it's about bringing stuff out of people to make them feel more positive. Anyway, does it make sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yeah. That's brilliant to hear, Tony. Thanks
I
for
mean,
sharing.
you know, apart from, you know, COVID and that, there's always pressures on, you know, government things and that. Do this, you've got to do that. You fit into a box, you know. But no, people, every person's an individual spirit, and they've got to find a way to try and express themselves and to enrich their lives, you know. And it's a bit of a tall order, but that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I do
Yeah,
love
that's really lovely. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Sonia.
Yeah, I was going to say that is really lovely, and I think when people are in a place where they're able to express themselves, that kind of, you know, if you're able to, Tony, to get people to sort of express themselves and create art or create something that's uplifting for them, not just for exhibitions but for them personally, then help them to get in a better place to, you know, I guess take those positive risks that will be good for them. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, what's great, I'm privileged in a way because I've been lucky that I've had this funding, and I've been all over the country, and I bring things back from other places, like down in Bristol. I've been down Bristol a lot. There's some fantastic things going on in Bristol, you know, and you find you can pass these things on and bring these things that's going off, you know, to wherever. And I lived in Nottingham for many years, by the way. I live in Derbyshire now, but I live in, you know, so I know Nottingham. I know the people there, you know. And I mean, I did a video, you know, Broadway in Nottingham. I was in a film thing 6 months ago, showing my archive films that I used to make, because I did a big film. It's not very good quality now, but it was about the Pakistani community in Nottingham and how people put people down. You know, and I did all of that. I want to do a lot of work like that. You know, done a lot of work like that, anti-racism stuff, because that forces people. This is what I call enforced isolation, where people are forced into isolated position because the way society wants to view people, the way they want to control people. So it's not all just about interior mental health. It's actually about the way people. Oh God, I'm dropping things on the floor here. You know, people actually are controlled, I think, by you know, society. That's my personal view.
No, I completely understand. I think I'll come alongside you in understanding that. I think the majority of people have now become the majority of people. It sounds incredibly simple. So, but if you don't necessarily follow what the majority of people think, then that can be ostracizing, and it can be considered not normal. And if you have a difference in opinion, that in and of itself can be very isolating, and isolation then obviously connects to loneliness. So
when I was younger, you know, and iller, so to speak, I used to have gangs of youths, you know, taunting me around the village, and they even put petrol bombs through my door. You know, that was like because I was different from everybody else. You know, and it's not like that now. But you know, I'm saying I've got personal experiences of this kind of stuff. If you don't conform, you know, but it's I don't know. I suppose I'm just trying to bring out positivity though, really now, because personally I've been through so much darkness. I want to aim towards the light, you know.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess, have you found through your work of kind of humanizing that feeling of loneliness and isolation that people have been more willing to kind of open up with themselves?
Oh yeah, there's some people that I've worked with. I've spent a lot of time with them, you know, over a period of time. I don't just go in and photograph someone and disappear 2 minutes later. But it's not always possible to do that. But, you know, I do try and build up relationships with people and encourage them, you know, to do things. And it's like, you know, it's a learning process for me, really. It's not just I know all the answers and this is what we do. I mean, it's not like that at all. But I've actually won 2 awards just recently. One for the National Historic England Archive, and one for World Photography Feminine Perspective from a man's point of view. And I did portraits of a lady who I know who was a painter and a poet down in Worthing, and I did pictures of her, you know. So, I mean, I could show you some examples, but I'm using the phone now. I can't really start screen sharing because I can do, I suppose, but I'm just so zonked out with this heat, you know. So, but you do these meetings regularly, it says on the, is that right, every fortnight?
Every second Tuesday of a month, so every month.
Well, I think maybe what I could do, you know, when you do another one on this topic, I could join in again, you know, and I might be a bit more together.
Absolutely, yeah. Honestly, this was not as kind of thematically controlled as some of our previous ones. So what we're thinking about doing is obviously cycling some of the topics that we go around. So loneliness, I'm sure, will be a topic we come back around to, most definitely, just because it's such a wide and varied topic with people's experiences varying from one side of the spectrum all the way to the other. So, and there's just so many things in terms of how people engage with it, what people do and such. And I know one of the key things we were talking about before was loneliness in relationships. So Jerome and Sonia brought up the whole thing about relationship breakdown causing loneliness from a lot of areas, friendship breakdown, lack of trust causing all those types of things. So I guess what we were thinking about was how in that way are we as individuals able to necessarily not stop but or almost put preventative measures in that loneliness coming from relationships in that way, because often it seems as though we can put a lot of stock into relationships as human beings, but do we then as individuals maybe have our own responsibility of not putting too much stock in relationships? So if, for example, they go bad, we are not left completely broken, destitute and isolated.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that there's one thing with relationships between people, because people are so different and so varied, and people have lots of different ways of interacting and thinking. It is difficult to have a relationship where, you know, two people are the same way of doing things, and at the end of the day, you can still have trust in a relationship knowing that the other person is not necessarily going to always respond positively to your way of thinking. I'm just thinking of, in the sense of, you know, for someone who isolates themselves because they're not able to trust people, it may be that has come from a place where if they feel they will be what's the word? I forgot the word. Let down by people, because people are different. So people will inevitably let you down a little bit. So you could, you know, if you know that in your relationships things are not always going to be 100%, that's what you were saying, Alex. Maybe we shouldn't put as much emphasis on, although relationships are good for our well-being, but our relationships, everything for our relationships between each other, that everything for our well-being. There should be other things in place for us to ensure that we are not in a place of, if the relationship with this specific person breaks down, I probably should have other things going on like relationship with other people, or relationship with God, or things that you do for yourself where you're able to think about life without having to have people's inputs and such. I'm not sure if it makes sense.
No, I definitely followed that. Anyone got any kind of other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would like to agree with what someone just said and pin on an element of being able to focus on oneself and to understand what your own desires and achievements are. I think in that you are able to become very self-aware, and once you have become self-aware and once you understand who you are as a person, it then can allow you to resonate a more sturdy and stable relationships when it comes to connecting with everybody else. So for instance, you know that you're not overreaching and you're not over-assuming what you would come to expect from a relationship. So if you know that you are an incredibly quiet person and you are confident in being a quiet person, you know that you're not going to be okay with another quiet person or another loud person, however you want to, whatever words you want to use. Like, when you know who you are and within that strength of who you are, you're able to then inform your relationships and not necessarily overextending. And then that is, I don't want to really use the word stability, but that just allows you to be able to have a stronger form of relationships with one another and moving forward.
Definitely. On that kind of note of, I guess, focusing on self, I guess, for example, if you can imagine that there's a person that has maybe just that one relationship that potentially breaks down, and the consequences of that for them, would you agree that it can potentially lead to them putting the onus on them? So, for example, if there's a relationship breakdown, they then start blaming themselves, it was their fault, causes essentially a cycle for them to then start having those negative perceptions of themselves, then furthering their own sense of isolating themselves from others, because, they then feel like any person that they form a relationship with will think that exact same thing of them. And if that's the case, how do you break somebody out of that cycle?
Well, I know from personal experience it had to come from within me, because I was virtually kept a prisoner by someone once for 2 years. Total isolation, enforced by this person. And it took me about 10 years to actually get free of all these thoughts, because if you have really bad things happen, then you cling to anybody and anything, and then if that person is only controlling or not empathetic and is narcissistic or something, then you have no sense of worth, and you can't actually see a bigger picture outside of that bubble, So I mean, I actually do a thing called expert by experience and expert patient. I actually help train junior doctors in mental health by my personal experiences. But all this has not happened overnight. It's taken years before I've actually got around to doing things and getting engaged with voluntary work, working with dementia, with the Red Cross. I've done all kinds of things, but everybody is different. Everyone can't necessarily. It's to try and find motivation points for people to actually look at the possibilities. But you've got to be really patient and work with people to actually get that. But ultimately, I think it comes from within yourself, with some encouragement, some proper help. And, it's really difficult. But also, interesting enough, I found people. I'm going to see someone in Nottingham soon who I know a bit, who loves solitude, who actually welcomes isolation, doesn't want to see a lot of people, but they've actually, become in tune with nature, just staying in an allotment all the time and things like that. So there can be positive sides to isolation, but not everyone's got that opportunity. It's creating opportunities as well for people to be able to engage with things that they want to enjoy or might not know they're going to enjoy, and then you know, they find to do it. And that's why this COVID thing makes it very difficult, because those options have been shut down, and they are kind of opening up a little bit now, but they've really been shut down. And that's caused, I think they're doing a lot of studies right now in mental health. It's really affected people on another layer, on top of everything else, you know. So there's a lot to work through there, isn't there? You know?
Absolutely.
And but I'm an optimistic person, even though I had a lot of pessimism at one time. I try and help people as much as I can, and you know, because I think, well, I did it. You know, I did it myself, but it wasn't easy, and it took years to do it. But there's a lot of factors involved, and one of them is to make sure that people have the base things. You know, they've got enough income to live on. They've got enough to be able to do enjoyable things. You know, there's lots of factors involved, and we start small and we grow bigger. You know. Did you say you were saying, someone was saying your group, is it a group you do walking things? Is that right?
So on Saturday we have meetups in the town centre as a way of kind of building and forming that community. But yeah, not necessarily. Well, people, it's open to kind of whoever would like to join and come in at any point. But yeah, so it's a bit more open, not necessarily restrictive in that type of sense, but it's, yeah, as we said, our way of building and helping to form that community and prevent some of those types of things that we've talked about. So those feelings of isolation and such.
And I'd like to know, I'd like to sort of find out more about that. I'm still actually, at the moment, I've not actually been into a city since March. I've not actually been into a city myself, you know.
It's starting to get a lot busier.
Pardon?
It's starting
Easily.
to get a lot busier.
Well, I'm coming down to St. Anne's allotments, like, but I won't go through the city centre, you know. But I'm lucky I've got a car, you know. But yeah, so I'd like to know more about that in depth, really, and kind of ask people at different times what, you know, what they're getting out of it and stuff like that. I'd like to find out about that, actually.
Yeah, with the
if-
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you were usually there in the square about 11 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday every week. So yeah, feel free to pop by. The city is there. We won't be going away. Yeah.
I've got a phobia as well about, I've got a phobia. I don't drive down motorways. I don't need to, for 15 mile away, but I don't drive into cities in my car. But then again, are the trams still running in Nottingham now? So you can get a tram.
They are, yeah.
I mean, you could wear a mask on a tram, can't you? So I might do that actually once, yeah. And then I just come down to Phoenix Park and get on the tram. I might be all right with that. You know.
Yeah, be happy to see you.
And well, I'll sort something out in a few weeks' time. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, just drop us a line. Malachi, thanks for joining. Can you hear us?
Well, I think in a minute, I'm not going to stay around too long because I need to get a drink of tea and stuff, and to lie down because I'm feeling slightly ropey, you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Don't push yourself, honestly.
I want to touch base and say that, you know, I really am interested in what you're doing, you know, but I can't do it all in one go, you know, kind of thing.
Thanks for joining us on short notice, Tony.
Yeah, you only asked me yesterday. I've got to do a thing. I'm supposed to have done it today, and I've put her off till tomorrow. I've got to do some photos and blurred for that hospital show for a brochure or something. So I put it off till tomorrow. Today I just feel a bit, ugh, you know. Can't be helped, can it? Then I'm doing a radio interview on BBC on Friday, talking about stuff. So I'll try and get my head together for that as well.
Sure.
But I want people to feel some kind of joy out of what I'm doing, rather than, oh God, you know, I've got to talk about my entire life history, and they haven't got to do that at all. They do whatever they want, really. I just want to get them to feel positive about themselves. That's what I'm trying to do. So we'll talk again, yeah?
Brilliant. Thanks a lot for your contributions, Tony.
Yeah,
I'll try and
Tony.
bring some examples through what I'm doing and everything, you know, later on in the week. Yeah.
Yeah, Tony, what I'll do is I'll drop you an email and I'll let you know exactly where we're meeting. And stay positive. It sounds like you're doing some fantastic stuff. And obviously, there's a lot of people that are able to reap the rewards of what you're doing. So
That'd be
continue to
fantastic.
do it,
Yeah.
and we look forward to seeing you, and we can journey along together because we understand what loneliness looks like.
Thank you. Okay, right. I'm going to put the kettle on.
See you shortly.
Yeah,
Take
okay, I'll
care,
be in
Tony.
touch soon.
Speak
Bye.
soon.
Bye.
Malachi, can you hear? Okay, maybe if you can't, if you can connect to the audio at any point, be good to hear some of your feedback as well. But Tony actually touched on a really interesting kind of theme I wanted to just mention in terms of having things for people to be able to engage with and find community in and such. And obviously that's not necessarily always something that the individual can do themselves. So to what degree do you feel that we as individuals, as a community, have as a responsibility for breaking people's loneliness?
I think if you were very easy to spot loneliness, and if you knew how to break it down to separate things, then it would be easy to it'd be great to see it happening. So I really like what Tony said earlier about finding people's motivation points and break them out of that cycle of perhaps sort of negative feelings that lead to loneliness. So I think the community should be responsible for that. And loneliness is about forming community, and community is about trust and be able to rely on each other when need be. And community is about being able to be there for each other, and that's how people don't stay lonely, I guess. So if we were able to pinpoint more easily those people in our communities that are lonely, it would be nice to then try and have good conversations and try and find these people, the motivation points that they need. Just two very different skills that are not easy, I think, to have.
Very true. In that sense, I guess, with people potentially, I guess, sorry, did you? Oh, my bad. Oh, cool. With, I guess, well, the thing I'm trying to hone in on is, obviously people can get caught up in a cycle of isolating themselves for whatever reason. And Tony kind of touched upon it a bit in that sense of it having to come from within to break that limit. Would you agree that there is an element that has to come from the individual?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. It's hard because I think And I wanna, I'm introducing new words left, right, and center here. Like the word depression. I know that there is a fair bit of stigma saying, oh, you need to self-motivate. And after speaking to one or two people that have suffered from depression and suffered from loneliness, that has been the biggest factor when trying to dig themselves out of loneliness and depression, because they're told that it needs to come from within, but they actually can't find what they're looking for in order to help self-motivate. So just want to put that into consideration. But I do agree. I think it does deal with, and Tony said it a lot, positivity. And there's tons of different avenues of which you can receive positivity. It's not necessarily tons of energy, and it's not necessarily a big smile, but it is a vibe, and it is light, and it is just the way in which your outlook in life. It is your outlook in life and where you're able to obtain your life from. And if you have trouble acknowledging that it's fairly hard to make yourself self-sufficient, because if you don't know where you are, and then you will instantly look for affirmations from other people's view of yourself, of which opens up a whole host of issues. Skirting around the topic ever so elegantly, if you're not understanding kind of who you are and how loved you are, and how wonderful you are and how God has created you, then you will find things that aren't necessarily as fulfilling in other forms of media, hashtag social media. But yeah, so.
And I'd agree with both of your points. There is that need for understanding your inherent value. And with each person, it's obviously going to come from different places. Us, we get it from God. It can, I guess it's finding that thing in you that is almost unshakable, but then understanding that lots of people have things in them that can actually be quite shaken. So you can feel like the most stable person, relationship going great, your relationship breaks down, and the person or thing that gave you, or you feel made you whole, essentially breaks. And then when that breaks, then you can then end up on a spiral of brokenness. So my thoughts would be that there is an element of, if you, without necessarily knowing, and this may well come with self-awareness, if you are not aware of what it is that you place value in yourself in, then there is every chance of that kind of being pulled from under you at some point, and then you then suffering those consequences as a result. Malachi, can you hear us?
We cannot hear you.
Yeah, your audio is not coming through. You got earphones? You know what, you can
reading pretty well.
if you want, you can pop something in the chat box if you want to add it to the conversation, if you want. Lost my thread. Looks like we're very antisocial. Yeah. What was the last bit I touched on? The inherent, I guess, what people put their value standing on, I suppose. And I know this could end up leading down a very, very long conversational path, but how, if you saw somebody putting that stock in what you may see as being the wrong thing or something that is very shaky, how would you go about potentially suggesting that that may not necessarily be the best path for them?
I'm very sensitive, having such a strong faith, not to, despite the fact I believe to a point at which I know that relationship with God is the answer, but very understanding that that may not be people's stance. So without necessarily going to what is the ultimate end goal, what I do is show them the fruits of what it is to not feel lonely, even though I am alone, and what it looks like to form good relationships, even though the person isn't a good relationship former, and what it is to give positivity in light of somebody being incredibly negative, and do that all very casually in the relationship, because that then inadvertently shows, hopefully, the aim of the game is to then say, you know what, Jerome is displaying a characteristic of which is other, whether it be positivity or whatever word you want to use. And in that way, to answer your question, Alex, I am being the best example of what it is to be able to show how to avoid a ill situation.
Oh, I like that. Anybody else got any thoughts?
I was going to say it will vary very widely depending on the level of trust there is within that relationship, because you can't just meet someone who you perceive to be lonely and for example, find out that they do drugs. So probably they are lonely, and yes, they do drugs as a way of trying to forget that. And you know, you can't just go and say, actually, what you're doing is wrong. That's not going to help you. It's going to make it worse. But that doesn't really work that way. So I like what Jerome said, as in show by example. That's really nice. I guess is having those, I guess, conversations. Again, the art of having a good conversation where you're able to pinpoint motivation factors that this person may or may not need. You know, you could always, yeah, if you know that this person is something else that they love, you know, you can encourage them on that. And you know, often through doing different activities, people will find, you know, new communities to be part of. And again, if the person that's supposedly lonely then starts, let's say, a new activity that they love, for example, photography, let's just go with that example, they may find a community of photographers, you know, who are like-minded, and they may actually find that they can be themselves with this community without being judged, for example. So yeah, finding motivation points, that could be a starting point to help someone, because like Tony said, he's not here anymore, but it is a long journey. So these things will take time.
Cool. We are so if anybody who is watching online, we are taking any questions at the moment, so feel free to post it through Facebook, and we will pick that up. So on a quick, I guess, complete lane switch, there was a study, actually, a poll that I'd seen not too long ago, actually, by Samaritans, and it was to do with loneliness. So the poll of 2,000 men aged 18 to 59 found that during the lockdown measures and social restrictions, 42% of them said their mental health had been negatively affected by the time in lockdown due to the lack of social connection as a contributing factor. So, of a poll of 2,000 men aged 18 to 59, they found that 42% said that their mental health had been negatively affected by their time in lockdown, with the lack of social connection being one of the biggest contributing factors. So, a question I would pose to you, because loneliness obviously has many ramifications and things that can go on, and consequences. And one of the most serious ones we know of that affects men at a higher rate is suicide. And loneliness, obviously, again, just through those stats, I think I can't remember the stats they had for women, but it did show that men seem to have been affected more during this period than women. So my question is, do you feel that society does enough to, I guess, engage with men in terms with things like loneliness and mental health and all those other kind of factors?
Mm.
I know that Malachi is going to say something, so what I'm going to do, see how it works, and I'm going to put him on audio. Let's.
We fight each other out.
Yeah, Malachi, I'm not sure if you want to say anything. We're going to try and join, you're going to join through proxy on my phone. You're going to have to turn yourself on mute off your phone because there's feedback. Let's see how it works. If it doesn't work, we'll forget it. Yeah, as a man, I guess I'll speak personal before I speak general. I think we're on the realms of mental health now, men mental health, and having a few conversations with this. This one's a very interesting topic. I'm going to briefly touch on. So I think there's a lot of masculinity of which comes into the way in which men display emotions, of which again similar connect to trust and vulnerability, and men not necessarily feeling those two words against other men, and dare I say it, men feeling it toward women, the ability to be vulnerable and to be to express themselves. But I think during this time to which the whole world had been paused and rhythms had been affected, I think I suffered from a moment of panic in March, of where my rhythm of going out into Nottingham to aid people had been completely thrown off. And I didn't think it would have affected me as much. I was like, oh, amazing, incredible. I just could chill at home and not necessarily give output. But it knocked me for 9, surprisingly, during March. And as I've said, thank God for God, that helped me inside to be able to bounce back from that. But I definitely am looking at, through what I've experienced, understand what it is to be able to express vulnerability. So your stats, or saying like the Samaritan stats, I understand it. They are a thing. I'm sure women have not too dissimilar stats, but I can't speak for women. So I just know that the things that affect mental health for men are things like being vulnerable, and trust, and masculinity.
That's a good kind of circle back to the idea of trust. And I think as you were talking, a thought came that I don't know why I'd never really thought of it in that way, or necessarily kind of, maybe I just hadn't thought of it in general anyway, but would you guys agree, and this is just a complete guess, that generally men are less trusting of others than women? And this is an incredible generalization. In that sense of, if you can imagine during this period, for example, would a man be as likely to pick up the phone and talk about go to a space where that would be perceived as vulnerable, to let that other person know how they are feeling, as opposed to a woman?
I think women have a very big need, or feel a big need, to talk about their emotions and their feelings, and most often we do that with each other, because we know, women listen, and are made to listen and give input, and like I could talk about stereotypes, but typically you don't get the same kind of responses that a woman would want to sort of hear. Like, women sometimes want to engage emotions, whereas men necessarily don't do that. Men are sort of like action related, problem focused, problem solving focused type thing, and sometimes women don't want to hear the solution to their problems, they just want to talk about them. So I think women are more likely to talk to each other, and perhaps even during this lockdown, that's been maybe apparent. I actually can't really, I don't know. I guess men in my life that I know of, it's very hard to gauge what they've been doing in lockdown to sort of cope. So I can only speak from a woman's perspective, basically. That's what I'm trying to get at. But I think women are much more likely to talk about things than men, yeah.
No, it's good to get that perspective. I'd never really looked at it in the sense of obviously, again, all of us speaking in generalizations, but men potentially being a bit more solution focused when talking, so less looking to dwell on, it's like, well, I feel this way and this way. It's like, all right, well, we'll just do that. Whereas it can be that maybe women are a bit better at just staying in that moment of how they feel, not necessarily looking for the quick fix or the fix at all, and just kind of having that I understand, or I can sympathize, I can empathize, and kind of go back and forth with those types of feelings. And if that's then the case, how would you suggest men get better at kind of not necessarily, well, again, in the general sense, not diving straight towards a generalization, a solution focused method of communicating in that way. The impossible question.
Human.
Yay, Malachi. Yeah, speak your mind.
1 minute, Kai, you there? Oh, it's gone. I don't know what you just did, dude.
Oh man,
Can't hear you again, Kai.
Until you're spitting facts at the moment as well.
He's getting frustrated as well.
Try
the disconnecting to audio and reconnecting to audio. What you was doing was working again. I don't know what button you was. Just be patient with that and try it again. Worst case scenario, I can send you a phone number, but then there's only 15 minutes left. So.
Whilst Kai's trying to connect,
Sorry, Alex.
Sonia, did you have any thoughts on how can we fix our sex, gender, whichever?
Lots of different ways. And I was just joking. Yeah, I think what men need. I think goes back to something that Jerome said earlier about society views on masculinity and vulnerability. It's kind of, it doesn't really mix those two things together in society's views. I think maybe now it's being more talked about again by sort of the statistics of like high suicide rate among men, for example. So it may be one of those issues that has actually become more highlighted as of more recent years or months. But men really need to be able to allow themselves to have spaces where they can have those conversations that are difficult. Hopefully over a beer. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not sure if you, yeah, I completely agree. I think this is exactly the heart of this fantastic platform that you've opened up, Alex. So to allow people to be able to have conversations of which have been sitting within them and being able to vocalize it and say, hey, this, I'm battling with this and I feel comfortable with this. And I do think there does need to be more active platforms where people can come and share and be heard and also speak. And that way you're able to battle with what you think is normal and also battle with what you don't think is normal and come to terms with it. I think that's a generic thing. I think that's a man and a woman thing. Men suffer with it a little bit more because of the whole masculinity thing. But I think women also have a thing to learn, for which I don't know what it is. I just know that women also love community the same way men do. I just don't know what it is.
It's funny, yeah. You could argue the time that we're living in now is one of the most kind of open times where people can share their thoughts, they can connect in ways they could never do 10, 20, 30 years ago. They can, and there's initiatives and there's purposeful ways that people are trying to push and dispel the narrative of masculinity looks like this or being a man is this way. So for me, sometimes I guess I would have thought there'd have been more progress in this time from where we have been to where we are now. So I guess the big learning point is, I suppose, change takes an incredible amount of time, especially when it comes to things that are so ingrained into the kind of gendered way of thinking and how we connect and communicate with each other. Because, you know, every month there's something new. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Men's Day for suicide awareness. It's all those types of conversations. It's like that that free call number we used to use.
You was on, Kai. Whatever you did, was it? Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, there's all types of things. There have been genuine efforts from what I can see of dispelling those long-held stereotypes and giving men a platform to open up and speak, and men that have shared their kind of viewpoints on where they were to where they are and how they've opened up and things. But I guess these are things that are very, very deeply entrenched, which I suppose I'm learning more and more now. Even in just for our Saturday Friends session and the way that people are able to open up through that, which I had taken for granted, having friends that I know I can open up to. So yeah, the narrative whilst it is breaking down, I imagine will take a lot of time to, whether it ever gets to a place that, you know, people can talk freely with each other and everything like that, who knows? But I suppose small progress is better than no progress.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and I agree with your surprise. If okay, can I humbly say this? Unless I'm missing something gaping, of which I probably am, and completely open to criticism, I don't recall there being a platform for men, or even women, or just something for people to come and be and develop community. Unless you're engaging with something to whether you're engaging, dare I say, in a club or community. When you're in a bar, is that a community? Who knows? But if you are a fan of music, that is a form of community. If you're a fan of plants, that's a community. If you're a fan of cars, but to just come and just be, I don't think that's a thing. And the reason why I say that is, I'm just coming alongside you and being surprised that, hey, it's so entrenched to who we are to be able to say, hey, how are you feeling, and be safe in disagreeing, that nobody's done it. And that it has been a fair bit of progression that needs to be happening in actually understanding who we are and what we need as humans. But
if anything, there's probably been regression in that sense, because we are living in very fast-paced days, and COVID has highlighted that it's not as fast-paced, not anymore, or it wasn't for a while. And people crave that because maybe that's where they find community, which is why more people are lonely. But actually, with all those distractions, yes, that's where I find community. But before all these distractions came along, so years and years ago, what people probably in a community used to do, or like in a village or in their towns, they probably used to sort of sit around in places and just talk, and so just be, not even necessarily talk. I'm imagining what was life like, before industrial revolution type thing. People had more space to just be and more time to just be, and they could actually be quite intentional about who they're speaking to, when they're speaking to them, and not be distracted with phones and such and everything else that comes with having a phone, social media and that. And so yeah, loneliness really is I've read somewhere, I'm quoting, an epidemic of the 21st century type thing. And yeah, we need to go back to basics, basically.
I like that. Epidemic of the 21st century. Agreed. One thing we can at least know was consistent from now to then was alcohol. So that has probably from the beginning and dawn of time been a way of getting people together. But I suppose you could argue, with that being said, and that, who knows, that may well be the staple way of especially men finding that community to open up. But I suppose there's the danger of using that as the tool to open up and it not really hitting the marks that you really need it to hit,
Mm-hmm.
So it could be finding a slightly new thing. #friends.
Plug it.
With 6 minutes remaining, I was hoping to hit that on 2029. But yeah, before we kind of start wrapping up, are there any kind of other points that people wanted to share?
I think loneliness is a scary thing and does need to be acknowledged and spoken about more in circles that aren't just working class, because upper class and middle class people also suffer from loneliness, and it's not just a class-based thing. So I think, yeah, that's all I have to say. It's not just a class-based thing. All people suffer from this, and it does desire for people to continue to develop genuine and loving connections.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm really caught on spotting loneliness. It's not an easy thing to do. And what if you do spot it, how do you, how can you like help someone to come out from there? I think that's really important to learn. I think to navigate that with someone, like it could be, you know, so many people have relatives of like committed suicide and they had no clue what their mental health state, that their mental health state was in that place. So I guess if people did speak more openly about loneliness and where people are in that stage of, you know, maybe it wouldn't be such a big issue if people knew they could talk about it. As with most things that sort of taboo.
Absolutely. Following on from your points, I guess the last thing that I'd mention is just on the back of your point, Sonia, that silence that we often keep things to ourselves, despite the fact we could be in a place where it's like, I suppose I always imagine on the tube when you're traveling back and forth from work, it's like the most silent type of place, in a group amongst lots of people. If you could somehow put some goggles on and see the people that are suffering from loneliness, you'd probably see a lot of things light up. And all it would necessarily take is that maybe one person to be like, to open up. Obviously the tube is not necessarily the easiest place to open up. It's just an example. But that whole silence thing, which relates to a lot of other themes and areas that we talk about, but just in different ways, in the same way that with the talk about race, people are saying, obviously, you can no longer be a silent bystander. You have to be active in these, like, deconstructing these systemic injustices. In the same way that we suffer from these feelings or these emotions that we know everybody has had, but for whatever reason want to pretend that we're the one that doesn't have it. There may well be something in being active in sharing your vulnerabilities to start that conversation with people, especially if you know those people don't have an easy time opening up.
Agreed.
Cool. Well, with 2 minutes to spare, that may well be a good place to wrap up. If anybody has any last minute thoughts and any questions that came in through Facebook.
Checking now. No questions, one comment.
One what?
No questions, one comment, of which is interesting.
Cool.
Malachi, and Malachi says that this discussion is good and that we need to discuss this topic some more.
Yeah, so what we're going to try and do with a lot of these themes is rotate them around. So by no means is this the last conversation about loneliness. And yeah, it's a very topical theme. We're going to come back to it. Definitely have more people on board to talk about it, maybe talk about their own experiences, and yeah, see how we can move forward and how in ourselves we can all do our bit to help people fighting loneliness in our community. Thank you for joining. Yeah, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Again, join us next in September, second Tuesday of the month. for our next conversation, and feel free to drop us a line if you've got any thoughts on what you feel our next topic should be. But from the rest of us and the gang, it was good to chat. Hope you guys were able to take something from it, and I shall bid you all adieu.
Thank you very much. It has been a very useful conversation.
That's it. We're done. We're done. No more live.